Hello and welcome to Aware on the Air, presented by members and friends of Aware, the anti-war, anti-racism effort, a local Champaign-Urbana peace group. I'm Carl Estabrook. We're recording this at midday on Tuesday, November 5th, in the studios of Urbana Public Television. It's Guy Fawkes Day, a remembrance of politics and torture that I wish I had time to tell you about today. Recordings of this series of programs and links to the articles we refer to today can be found on the Facebook page for Aware of Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. Comments on this program are welcome. Email us at cgestabrook. Now let's change that. Email us at Carl, C-A-R-L, Carl at newsfromneptune.com. Our program concentrates on the news of U.S. war-making, which is generally not reported, not by accident, in the U.S. media. When it is, it's a jingoistic celebration of American virtue. Those attending to the News Gazette's feature, Those Who Served, meaning in the U.S. military, should recall the remark by the late George Carlin that service is a funny name for killing people. Since 1945, the United States government has killed over 20 million people in wars in Korea, Vietnam, the Middle East, Latin America, and elsewhere, designed to maintain the worldwide economic hegemony that the U.S. inherited as the only largely undamaged major country after World War II. Russia lost some 27 million people in defeating Nazism. The U.S. lost 500,000 in World War II as a whole. To counter the vast American government propaganda on its role in killing people for the benefit of the U.S. 1%, I suggest beginning with Nicholson Baker's 2008 book, Human Smoke, The Beginnings of World War II, The End of Civilization. In his play Murder in the Cathedral, the poet T.S. Eliot wrote words that seem to me to apply to the current impeachment embroglio in the U.S. Quote, "The last temptation is the greatest treason, to do the right deed for the wrong reason." What that means at the present moment is that President Trump should be impeached and removed from office, but not for the Russiagate or Ukrainegate nonsense, rather for his high crimes and misdemeanors of war-making. After World War II, we hanged Nazi leaders at Nuremberg for the crime of aggressive war. In the judgment of the International Military Tribunal, which the U.S. essentially ran, quote, "War is essentially an evil thing. Its consequences are not confined to the belligerent states alone, but affect the whole world. To initiate a war of aggression, therefore, is not only an international crime, it is the supreme international crime, differing only from other war crimes in that it contains within itself the accumulated evil of the whole." Close quote. It's been pointed out that the Nuremberg laws, under which we hanged Nazi leaders, if the Nuremberg laws had been applied to American leaders, every post-war American president would have been hanged for aggressive war. We turn to another issue in contemporary American politics. There's an article in the current issue of the magazine Jacobin entitled "Elizabeth Warren is Jeopardizing Our Fight for Medicare for All." Whatever her intentions, Elizabeth Warren's plan to finance Medicare for all has made winning single-payer far more complicated than it should be. Every other advanced industrial state has some version of single-payer, only the United States doesn't. Elizabeth Warren has jeopardized a wildly popular policy that should be a political slam dunk in the process. Senator Warren announced that she's co-sponsoring Representative Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All. That's the number of the bill in the Congress is H.R. 1384. Eddie Barkin published a rather overblown and History Begins Now take on this co-sponsorship in an article in The Intercept, that peculiar political publication, about this co-sponsorship. Barkin called Warren's H.R. 1384 co-sponsorship, quote, a massive win for the Medicare for All movement, which will help persuade our friends and families and neighbors to support Medicare for All, and in the not-too-distant future, to convince Congress, too. Close quote. But neither the U.S. nor Congress needs to be convinced of this. The U.S. has long held that Medicare for All was the right and proper way to handle health care delivery to all Americans, since well before H.R. 1384 was written, well before Pramila Jayapal became Washington's 7th District representative. Congress knows this. The HMOs, the health maintenance organizations, know this too, and that's why they spend money on campaign contributions. Kaiser Permanente, one of the largest HMOs, is one of Senator Warren's top donors in the 2020 presidential cycle, giving her campaign $55,000, according to OpenSecrets.org. Senator Warren is Kaiser's fifth highest recipient of campaign contributions. Only the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, and Kamala Harris got more. So it's safe to say that Congress doesn't need to be convinced of the electorate's support for Medicare for All either. H.R. 676, titled the United States National Health Care Act, was a very highly reviewed Medicare for All bill, which was introduced to Congress by the late Representative John Conyers in 2003. The group Physicians for a National Health Program estimated the immediate savings from making H.R. 676 law at $350 billion per year. The Intercept article doesn't mention anything about what happened to H.R. 676 or why the current H.R. 1384 is said to be H.R. 676's replacement, but the story is telling. H.R. 676 collected co-sponsors, 124 co-sponsors by the time of the 115th Congress in 2017 and 18, slightly more co-sponsors than Jayapal's current H.R. 1384 has now. Conyers' H.R. 676, the older one, metaphorically sat on the shelf. It never came up for a vote, even when the Democrats had a majority in both houses of Congress and a Democrat, President Obama, in the White House. This is probably why Barkin doesn't cover what happened to H.R. 676. There's no part of this story that makes the Democrats look good. Any clear-eyed understanding of this history shows the Democrats as the HMO subservient party that they are, no different from the Republicans. This is also a story that tells us how much stock we should put in Barkin's and the Intercept's claims. That claim of being a massive win, for example, is hugely overblown because we've already seen what happens to Medicare for All when Democrats run in Congress, even with a Democrat Party president. The Democrats use Medicare for All as a means of getting some beneficial PR and ultimately deceiving the electorate into believing that Democrats care about Medicare for All law, when the reality is the Democrats collect corporate campaign money to prevent Medicare for All from becoming law. What did we get instead of Medicare for All? The Democratic Party pushed for and got Obamacare, which was originally Romney Care from Massachusetts, a law written by and serving the interests of the HMOs. From this, we apparently got continued HMO control, we got more death, we got more poverty, and we continue to get worse overall health care outcomes than other countries that deliver health care to all of their citizens, and we got all of this at greater health care costs. Those HMOs need money. It makes no sense to support Senator Warren's campaign on the basis of her co-sponsorship of H.R. 1384. We're currently farther away from seeing H.R. 1384 become law now than we were when H.R. 676 was co-sponsored because Democrats have more barriers in front of them in order to make the new version, H.R. 1384, law. Warren would have to win her presidential campaign, highly unlikely, since the Democrats pursue matters the public doesn't care about, such as Russiagate, and achieve things the public hates, such as war and sanctions. The Democrats would have to become a majority in both houses of Congress, unlikely for the same reasons, and Democrats would have to overcome their reliance on HMO campaign funding. There's no clear evidence that Democrats want H.R. 1384 to become law. There is evidence that Senator Warren and The Intercept want the electorate to transfer any approval of Medicare for All to Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaign. This incisive analysis comes from our chief researcher, Jeff Nicholson, and the references can be found on the Facebook page for Aware on the Air. Tulsi Gabbard, the only anti-war candidate in the presidential sweepstakes, introduced a bill to withdraw troops from Syria. The resolution says Syrian oil belongs to Syria. Representative Tulsi Gabbard, Democrat from Hawaii, introduced a resolution to the House of Representatives on October 31st titled Directing the President pursuant to Section 5C of the War Powers Resolution to remove United States armed forces from hostilities in the Syrian Arab Republic that have not been authorized by Congress. Close quote. The idea of the bill is to remove any troops in Syria that do not have congressional approval to be there, which is all of them. The resolution says Congress has not declared war with respect to or provided any statutory authorization for United States military participation in any activity relating to securing, guarding, possessing, profiting off of, or developing oil fields in northern Syria. All of these actions are unconstitutional. Close quote. The resolution also points out that President Trump's new plan to stay in Syria, quote, to secure the oil, close quote, is a flagrant violation of international law. The resolution says, quote, oil, natural resources, and land in Syria belong to the Syrian people, not the United States, close quote. Although the House was quick to condemn Trump's withdrawal from northeast Syria to avoid a confrontation with Turkey, his new plan to secure the oil has not come under much scrutiny. The language in Gabbard's bill would make it tough for any member of Congress to argue against it. And it would also bring to people's attention that the only anti-war candidate running in the upcoming presidential election is the Democrat Tulsi Gabbard. Meanwhile, Turkish-backed forces attacked the Kurds south of the Syria safe zone. The Kurdish SDF, the Syria Defense Force, which is primarily Kurdish, launched counterattacks outside of that town. Fighting has erupted in and around the northeastern Syrian town of Tal Tamr, where Turkish-backed rebel groups, these are jihadis basically, have been looking to move against Kurdish defenses. That's the jihadis, the terrorists that the United States, of course, was supporting in the region, the Obama administration particularly. This is a particularly important site of conflict, as it's well south of the Turkish-claimed Syrian safe zone. Turkish-backed groups made moves against the town and surrounding area last week and are not backing away. The Kurdish SDF, Syrian Defense Force, according to Syrian officials, have launched counterattacks in the area, backed by artillery fire. The Kurdish SDF and the Syrian government, the Damascus government, are now in alliance against this Turkish invasion. The fall of Tal Tamr and neighboring villages would give Turkish forces an opportunity to push even deeper into eastern Syria, threatening the main cities in Hasakeh province. The SDF, the Kurdish resistance, is reporting that a volunteer from the U.S.-based Free Burma Rangers was killed over the weekend when Turkish forces attacked their car. The volunteer was named Zhao Zeng and was documenting Turkish attacks in the region. It's reported reliably that U.S. troops are not sure who they're supposed to shoot at in Syria. The commanders have been sent to the oil fields by the president, but no missions have been given. The U.S. war in Syria is undergoing a dramatic change in recent weeks. Simply looking at President Trump's Twitter, the impression is the war ended, then restarted, and went from being about ISIS, which is never quite clear anyhow, to being about oil. The Pentagon isn't operating based off Trump's Twitter, however, and that's unfortunate for commanders, as they've been local commanders, local American commanders, as they've been scrambling around to oil fields without any actual orders or clear missions of what they're supposed to be doing. Since both the Pentagon and the administration, last one and this one, have been lying about what they're doing there all along, it's not surprising that even the local commanders are confused. It's a confusing time to be part of America's war in Syria, as clearly the war is something about oil, and the presence of the U.S. troops in Syria reflects that. Troops aren't even clear who they're supposed to be protecting the oil from, or what the rules of engagement are with respect to protecting the oil. Top officials aren't clarifying that either, sometimes presenting the U.S. as keeping the oil from ISIS or away from Iran, and other times flat out saying that they're to keep Syria's oil away from Syria. Trump is more specific about his ambitions to take the oil than filling in the huge gaps in that plan. Some defense officials are saying the lack of orders is because there haven't been any decisions made yet on what the troops are going to do in the oil fields beyond going there. They confirm that's a substantial problem for commanders. Meanwhile, a U.S. B-52 bomber unexpectedly approached the Russian base in Syria. The bomber flew close to the border of Syrian airspace. Adding to constant tensions between the U.S. and Russia, Russian officials reported that a U.S. B-52 bomber made a surprise approach towards their Haimamin air base in western Syria. The bomber showed up off the coast of Greece, made a run towards the Syrian airspace before cutting away and going into Jordan instead. U.S. officials are not saying what they actually were doing there. Russians are speculating this was related to Russians' deactivation of an S-400 defense system near Haimamin, which would leave the site more vulnerable. They believe the U.S. was trying to scare Russia. Such a circumstance would probably never be confirmed by the U.S., and while the U.S. likes to keep a lot of warplanes active in and around Syria, which they have no illegal right in, they rarely will comment on what they intend beyond proving they can fly anywhere they want. This is what our government is doing in the Middle East. You're watching Aware on the Air. We're talking about America's war making and the support for it and lack of that at home, and the way in which the government makes sure that Americans, fundamentally anti-war as they are, don't really know what's going on in Syria, where the U.S. is following a traditional imperialist war policy. Danny Scherson, who a retired military officer, has been writing well on this matter. Scherson was in Iraq and wrote about his experiences there, and has been writing about the American war making in the region for a long time. And now in the L.A. Times, The Nation, HuffPost, The Hill, Salon, Truthdig, Tom Dispatch, you may have seen his articles in those publications. He served combat tours with reconnaissance units in Iraq and Afghanistan, and later taught history at his alma mater, West Point. He's the author of a memoir on critical analysis of the Gulf War called Ghost Riders of Baghdad, Soldiers, Civilians, and the Myth of the Surge. He's also on Twitter at Skeptical Rat, which he clearly is. When the feds are out to get you, he writes, you just might be doing something right. And antiwar.com, that's a website, a libertarian perhaps website, antiwar.com has been doing what's right for decades. Long before the 9/11 attacks and the resulting American wars of revenge and hegemony, Eric Garris, Justin Raimondo, and the site's editors and columnists had already diagnosed and set out to expose the disease of American militarist imperialism. In the Pax Clintonia 90s, that is American worldwide hegemony after the fall of the Soviet Union, in the Pax Clintonian 90s, this wasn't a popular thing to do. That is, to run a site like antiwar.com. It took courage, just as it took courage to criticize the early days of U.S. war-making that came on the heels of the terror attacks in New York and Washington, D.C. in 2001. Those were heady days when the FBI, replete with sweeping new powers to violate citizens and organizations' constitutionally protected right to free speech and broader civil liberties, was flailing and seemingly coming unhinged. And it wasn't just the law enforcement and intelligence agencies out there policing dissent and setting the boundaries of, quote, acceptable discourse, close quote. The corporate media and much of a frightened, uninformed citizenry conflated any critique of America's war with treason and abetting the enemy. These were, after all, the days of Manichaean binary Bushisms, like either you're with us or you're with the terrorists. The whole charade harkened back to other periods of alarmist dissent, squashing, such as the World War I era let me try that again. The whole charade harkened back to other periods of alarmist dissent, squashing, I still can't say his line right. He's talking about squashing of dissent and the FBI doing that in the days after 9/11. And he compares that situation to the World War I era Red Scare, Cold War McCarthyism, and heck, and even today's mainstream liberal attacks on Tulsi Gabbard and her supporters as, quote, Russian assets. That's Hillary Clinton's comment that's been taken up by the Democrats and others. It was during that climate of post-9/11 repression that the FBI began investigating and writing surveillance memos on the leaders of the website antiwar.com, which implied that they and the site's content, constitutionally protected free speech, mind you, was somehow subversive. After an observant reader brought the secret investigation to light, the editors of antiwar.com sued the FBI, demanding that it turn over all the memos and records it was keeping on the two editors and the website. Now, just a couple of months ago, in a major victory for the site and free speech, a federal appeals court ruled in antiwar.com's favor. It's just a shame that Justin Raimondo, who died in June from a long bout with cancer, wasn't around to see it. He was the principal editor of antiwar.com. Although the government can appeal, the ruling was profound. However, it's unlikely to measurably alter FBI procedures in this era of mass surveillance and the NSA hacker state. As another editor in kindred anti-war spirit has said, quote, I would hope this precedent will help prevent the FBI from doing these things again, but we know it won't. It won't. Worse still, though the FBI has ordered to pay antiwar.com's legal fees, antiwar.com's legal fees, the site incurred all kinds of other losses, pecuniary and reputational, when the story broke. Major funders stopped contributing, perhaps out of fear, which is a big blow to a nonprofit website largely reliant on donors and reader contributions to survive and operate. In a world where mainstream corporate media offer little more than vacuous entertainment, do you like the blue team or the red team, is veritably obsessed with Trump and hardly covers America's countless wars unless someone in power dares to question them, at which point he or she is labeled a Russian asset, antiwar.com is more vital than ever. Though fiercely libertarian and quite strategically committed to ending wars by, quote, attacking the right from the right, the site has no political or ideological litmus test. The mission, its sacred mission, is to preserve the republic by helping to end endless war, period. Like-minded allies are welcome. That's why the editors of Lie Lefty, like Major Sturgeon, whose article I'm reading, publish up a storm on anywar.com. I truly believe there is, just a tad beneath the political surface, a genuine public desire, even, remarkably among combat veterans, to bring the nation's wars to a close. The public is inveterately anti-war. Furthermore, writes Sturgeon, call me a John Lennon-esque dreamer, but I think 2020 may just be a pivotal year, a turning point. And I'm not the only one. Whether I'm right or not, count on this. Antiwar.com will be in the vanguard of that movement, speaking inconvenient truths to power. The site and its columnists have been doing that since 1995, way before it was cool. Authenticity is Antiwar.com's brand. You're listening to Aware on the Air. We're talking about some of the anti-war news that doesn't find its way into mainstream media. What a surprise. Here's a piece from Ray McGovern, who is a former intelligence officer and for 27 years in the CIA, and as an analyst, including as chief of the Soviet Foreign Policy Branch, and preparer briefer of the President's Daily Brief in the Bush administration. He's co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, VIPS. Ray McGovern writes about American war-making and the suppression of dissent in the U.S. This is a brief piece called First They Came for Max. McGovern posted this on the 1st of November. He says, well, not really first. They'd already come from Chelsea Manning, for Julian Assange, for John Kiriakou, for Jeffrey Sterling. The list is longer still. Last Friday, they came SWAT-like for the founder and editor of thegrayzone.com, journalist Max Blumenthal, whom they arrested, cuffed, jailed, and shackled, and prevented immediate access to a lawyer. Corporate media didn't say anything. Meanwhile, former CIA acting director John McLaughlin, the WMD slam dunker extraordinary, said, of course, there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when we wanted to attack Iraq, and it was a slam dunk. A devoted fan also of Iraqi bioweapons fabricator, Curveball, a fake intelligence source, this is the former active director John McLaughlin, told a captive audience, thank God for the deep state. Obama shied away from holding McLaughlin, I'm just talking about, and his boss George Tenet accountable for fraudulent intelligence before Iraq, while Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence Carl Ford said the two of them should be shot for the fabricated intelligence. As for the former partners in crime and direct descendants of Tenet and McLaughlin, Brennan and others, Obama chickened out there too. He could not even find the courage to rein them in from illegal activities to help Hillary, which are about to be revealed in all their squalor by Justice Department investigations, unless Trump too chickens out. Interesting comment by McGovern, but this is still in the offing, perhaps. Ray McGovern wears an unkempt beard these days, a sign of solidarity with good and admired friend Julian Assange. And his comments are informed and deeply disturbing about what the U.S. government is doing about dissent against American policy, whatever it happens to be. You have been watching Aware on the Air, produced and directed by Jason Liggett and Andrew Scollery. Thanks to him also, this program and others like it will be available on YouTube and archive.org. Comments on this program are welcome. Email me at Carl, C-A-R-L, at newsfromneptune.com. We rely on our researcher, Jeff Nicholson, whose blog, Digital Citizen, we recommend highly. There's a link to it on our Facebook page, along with his detailed notes to this program. Jeff has provided the following video for tonight's program. Chris Hedges interviewing defendants about the Kings Bay Plowshares 7 case. Serious anti-nuclear and anti-war activism, unreported, of course, in mainstream media. See links on the Facebook page for Aware on the Air to this and other matters that we've discussed. Finally, Aware honors those who reveal the crimes of the U.S. government, which the rest of the world knows about, but Americans don't. Assange, Manning, Snowden, and others, who are the real whistleblowers, truth-tellers persecuted by the U.S. government, including our liberal Democratic Senator Durbin, a shill for the Russiagate propaganda and unconstitutional attacks on the free press, notably in the case of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. Now, this is Carl Estabrook for the members and friends of AWARE, the anti-war, anti-racism effort of Champaign-Urbana, saying the words of the late newsman Edward R. Murrow, good night and good luck.